So, hello and welcome to Rauta's opinion videos, or not so much an opinion, but more kind of a video response, thanks to some of the ideas on the last opinion video some week ago, which was about 10 albums from different genres to take on a desert and island. I know that's kind of a hell of a lot of stuff to deal with, but I had to kind of limit myself with the genres. Now, there were some people who wanted to comment what their 10 picks would be, which kind of course, makes sense a lot. But some people failed to grasp that the idea was to pick, say, like one thrash metal album, one black metal album, one death metal album, one doom metal album, and so forth. I didn't say as such which particular genres should be included. I just wanted to make like my top 10 albums in a way. Top 10 lists are always so kind of hard to do because obviously when you're active music fan, listener, or collector, whatever you want to call yourself, it's really hard to just pick 10 albums, not to mention like 5, 3, or whatever. Of course, in a short time span, say like top 5 albums for last 3 months, it's totally different, or even 1 year, and you've seen already of those kind of album lists on the channel, and sometimes you actually like them, which is always cool stuff to hear. But this time I need a little bit more time to explain what I'm trying to say here, and since I don't want to keep this as like 3 minutes response and say bye, I need a glass of whiskey. Tonight I'll be having a big strand Islay single malt Scotch whiskey. So just wanting to show you the bottle. This looks like I am just sipping some water, very colorless stuff, but let me tell you, this is very, very good stuff. Peaty, malty, smoky, and all that stuff. So, Slangeva, like they say in Scotland, and oops, a little spilling. So let's get it going. Now, some people actually, made those lists, and wonderful dozens of comments about what albums people would be picking. Some didn't actually make even like top 10 list, which was a surprising thing because I mean usually people are like, oh man, I just couldn't do it even with top 50, not to mention like 10 or whatever. But there were some really cool ideas. Some people that totally grasped the idea of that list, in order to pick some different ideas. Even hard rock and whatnot was included. Some even had classical music, which is totally okay. Actually, my list had Pink Floyd as a kind of a wild card band, if you will. Now, I've been pondering since, the video comments, which I just actually finished reading not too long time ago, like half an hour. I was just, finishing an interview, which will be out by the time of this video, so that's kind of a past already. And I know there will be some comments later on, but unfortunately they won't be making to this list for the obvious reasons. I'm already done by that. But I started to wonder, would it make more sense, for me to give you ideas like what would my like top 5 death metal albums or black metal albums be, or should it be even more kind of a tougher picks like top 5 Norwegian black metal albums from the 90s, or just generic like top 10 or of any given time, or top 5 of Norwegian bands, Finnish bands, or whatever, and then the genre of course included, because I think those are something that actually make a huge difference. Even with my list, like some of my hard rock favorites couldn't make that list. For example, I've been a fan of Mötley Crüe and Skid Row, at least early years, since I was a kid, and they were kind of important bands back then. But obviously they couldn't make it to the list, as you already witnessed, because like I said, even with top 10 list, when you have like one band from any given genre, it's really difficult to just pick the one album and leave the others out. For example, Rain in Blood, in my case, was kind of a no-brainer when it comes to thrash metal. Then again, I'm also a big fan of early Metallica. There are other Slayer albums which I'm strongly in love with, like Seasons in the Abyss, South of Heaven, just for example. Maybe Exodus debut album should be there, could be there at least, and so forth. You get the idea. And I have to admit there was some kind of a rule bending in one way, because I, for example, included Dissection there with also having Dark Throne on the list. So we could say that even I didn't play by the full set of rules. But then again, for example, in the case of At the Gates, should or would that be like a death metal album, or just a melodic death metal, or whatever, or Dissection's case, is it a Black Death like some people I remember calling it back in the late 90s, or is it now purely just black metal album as nowadays people seem to think? So rule bending or different perspective change those lists a lot, because obviously it's sometimes really hard to decide if an album should go in that box or that box. And we already discussed the problematic points when it comes to genres. I already made the video a couple of weeks ago why genres are important, why they need to be there, even though sometimes we just dislike them or hate them. As much as we hate labeling, the reason why hashtags are the thing of this decade, be it Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, or whatever. I mean, we need those labels, and as such, picking just 10 albums and not trying to overlap with the genres, it's kind of a difficult task. But then again, like I said, things would be totally different if I had to pick top 5 Florida death metal bands or albums, and or just in general top 10 death metal albums and so forth. So I don't know, what do you think? Are these kind of listing videos with maybe a little more info about the releases, or my personal opinions, or lyrical views, are they important? Are they just waste of time, or should I be making more of those? Because obviously, I don't know. I need some kind of a advisor, like we call having booze or alcohol in general. Something to give your brain an advice. But back to your lists. Now, I urge people who were viewing the original top 10 Deserted Island video, I urge you to just check out the comments if you want to find something out of your, I don't know, box or life, because there were actually some really, really interesting choices. Some of them are plain weird. Some of them are like, okay, I would have picked that one, but I totally understand why these albums or bands are mentioned. So it became more like a brainstorming, kind of a response thing, rather than what I was expecting, just people to just thumb up or thumb down, or maybe just like, oh, nice video, bro, whatever. So thank you for these comments. It was really nice to see that you've also been pondering your favorite albums. It's always good thing to question what would it be your top 5, top 10, or top 25 choices for this kind of situation. It's not like it's very not realistic to end up in a situation like this, of course, but I mean it's nice that we actually have to question like which albums we actually eventually like so much that they are better than the others. I mean, usually we don't have to have a conversation or debate about those, but then again, it's also nice to have these kind of lists, so that sometimes we might even forgot some of our favorite albums, and later on, oh man, I just totally forgot that album to be on that list. Now I have to kind of fix it, or at least I have to keep that album a spin after so many years of silence and whatnot. So I don't know, I kind of had this first world problem that I don't have the time to listen to many of my favorites these days. Of course, it's just matter of kind of energy and principles and priorities and whatnot. But for example, in my case, I have so many albums I need to get reviewed. That basically every spin of an album, I am listening to something other than my review pile album. I feel like I'm, just neglecting my review job, if you will. But then again, I also, have this urge to listen to these classics and favorites every now and then in order to kind of like remember where I am coming from, why these classics or favorites are what they are in the first place. It's not like it's easy to forget, the albums that have been going with you like past 20 years, or it doesn't matter how many years you've been into metal or whatever. But for example, my early favorites, like I mentioned, the Wasp Last Command, uh, it has been going with me like more than 35 years, basically, if I just, include the very first time I heard the album. Now, of course, there was like huge, spans of time when I didn't listen to that. I didn't even have it in my collection. I had kind of like forgotten the album just because like it was my childhood favorites and whatnot in the 80s. But in one way or another, some of those classics are the ones that kind of go with you, even though you would have been like years of uh, time you wouldn't have been listening to these kind of albums, because eventually everybody who has a small pool of early favorites, they end up like running those albums so many times that they kind of can hear instantaneously the songs in their head when they kind of hear the first few notes, and then it's kind of a moot point to even listen to the whole album, because you just can basically hum to it. You're like and go with it, and sometimes it kind of feels like that when you have like overused such an album, that why would you even listen to it, because you already know back and forth through and through, and as such it might even feel a little bit of not disappointing, but kind of like you don't have the urge, the need to listen to those albums just because you've heard them so many times. It's like everybody can get, bored of their favorite things. I mean, like, I like pizza, I'm not the small guy anymore. But still, I wouldn't be eating pizza 7 times a week, 7 times a day. Well, not that either. Or hamburgers, or even my favorite beers and whiskeys. I wouldn't even have sex 7 times a week if it was that to be happened. Well, maybe I would, but that's a different story. I mean, like listening to your favorites every day or every week, I mean, would make very little sense, considering that you nowadays have access to not only hundreds of albums, but millions of songs. And even though I have some few hundred CDs, I'm kind of a picky. I like to do. Sometimes people are like, "Man, I thought you would have like thousands of albums." No, because I sell most of my albums away. I just try to be picky, but still I have way too many of them. But the point is that if you had to just listen to your favorites every day or every week, you might just get kind of bored with them. You just feel like they have been overplayed, if you can use such a word. So it's like built in our biology or whatever, that even our favorite things can become not annoying as such, but kind of we get fed up with things. We need change. Maybe that was one of the reasons why I became such a boring review guy, but I don't know. Nowadays, when I pick an album that I haven't been listening for years due to review stuff and like that, it's really refreshing. So in a way, this is also a blessing in disguise, because you don't have the luxury of time, listen to your favorites every week or every month. Then they become these kind of treasures that you end up listening, and you're like, man, now I want understand again and again and again why I fell in love with this album like some 20 or 30 years ago, or with some younger people like 5 years ago. So long blabble, blabber, blaffer, whatever you want to call it, and well, Hope you have some ideas and suggestions which way you want to see these lists going, or are they just futile in the first place? Do we need those lists at all? Because there are plenty of opinion videos which need to be done, which I have ideas for. But well, I tried to make this a short response and I failed. It's already 15 minutes and going. So keep your opinions going. Thank you very much for your comments. Thank you a lot for your time. You have been viewing and watching these stuff or listening me talk about metal and stuff like that. I will have lots of suggestions for you regarding metal and whatnot, but always remember they are all very subjective. Whatever I might like, you might not, and that's how it should be. So once again, Shlanjava, keep peace, cheers, kampai, and all that stuff. Have a good day, night, evening, morning, or whatever you're doing right now. Be kind to yourself. Cheers.